Thank you, Tim. 大家好. I was so excited to be invited to be part of this gathering. I've wanted to be a part of it for a long time. And looking at what topics we could do, there were a few that came to mind. So first, I was thinking a universal system for learning tonal languages. This is my passion. Who wants to learn about that? Okay, we're not doing it today. Now, this is another thing. How many Japanese speakers here? How many Chinese speakers here? How many Korean speakers here? How many are native speakers of a language that uses kanji? Okay, there is a whole lot of secret information embedded into hiragana that you can actually access and tweak to get in your muscles that are going to build native prosody in the way your body reacts to Chinese, Japanese, and that. You want to learn about that? Okay, not today. We were just doing that. We heard in the presentation earlier, which is great. And another topic I'm passionate about is turning standard Malay into colloquial Indonesian. There is a formula to be able to do that. Because many Malays will listen to Jakarta, people speak in Jakarta and thing, and although they say that the basic bahasa Melayu, bahasa Indonesia is similar, that it's easy to learn, but when Malays go to Jakarta, any Malays here? Or any orang Malaysia? Okay, so can you understand, kalau aku ngomong bahasa dari Jakarta, ngerti nggak? Bisa? Bisa, lagi ngapain lo? Itu nggak bisa. But the actual language that we speak on the ground is very different. And so, but there is a formula you can use. Do you want to learn how to tweak Malay into native Indonesian? You're not going to learn that. So, and then the other one here is the usefulness of Danish around the world. It's a very Danish, you wouldn't believe how useful Danish has proved to be, especially in Southeast Asia. Serious. I've spoken Danish since I was quite young, and it is unbelievable how many places Danish has actually totally changed the experience of wherever I am. So if you want to learn a language that's going to blow you away and you'll be able to use all over the world, learn Danish. Is that enough propaganda for... Yes. And the other one, how many people have seen my clip that I put a few years ago on Hangul and the connections into Sanskrit and the Pagspa script? Okay, I had half of Korea wanting to kill me, and the other half looking into it. Now, I highly recommend, scan that QR code. There is a new movie out called The King's Letters. And they have made an entire movie about the process that King Sejong went through to develop Hangul with his linguists that actually learned from many, many Sanskrit-based scripts, including Pagspa and other ones, and they actually go into the linguistics of it. So I've put the QR code so you can go back home tonight and watch it on your mobile phone. Get it while you can still watch it and it hasn't been pulled. Oh. Okay, but that is a fantastic topic and thing to look into, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. Today we're going to be talking about what I do for my living. Because as people who speak different languages here, can I just ask, how many people work professionally in language here? Good question. How many... Teaching language, interpreting, language apps, translation. How many people are in this business? Okay. How many people work in other professions where language isn't necessary for that profession, but you might use it? Put your hands down if you're in the language business. If you're in a profession that does not require many languages, Okay, so you notice we've whittled down to certain people. So I'm going to say some things today that might be a bit controversial. It might push the way, or your comfort, the way you feel about things, but I hope that it'll get you thinking, because if you haven't noticed, if you haven't met me before, but I get passionate about language, but I got to pull that back when I'm in the real world. Okay, we're in a group of us today, and we're all very special people. But once we get out of these walls, we can't talk about the stuff that we normally talk about. Otherwise, you're Rain Man. Okay? And so we're going to look at that. But there are ways that the stuff that we all do as polyglots, we're in an age now where our skills are super, super valuable to the business world. And so I've been working in this world for about almost, 30 years now. And I'm going to share with you some of my experiences, what I do, what's worth money and what's not. And then how you can steps that you can do to actually generate and make yourself a product that is worth way beyond what you might have been pegged for originally if it's just based in language. Interested? Yeah. Okay, so in the intelligence world, you're looking at 4 key areas of intelligence: HUMINT, SIGINT, IMINT, and MASINT. So HUMINT, human intelligence. So traditionally, that's the stuff where people train up, they get their tradecraft, they go in on the ground, and they do their stuff to get people off the ground. They get information from the ground. Okay? That is a hugely labor-intensive thing to train people up and get them to go in, and it was usually done by governments for national security. Okay? It doesn't just have to be. So from now on, all of this intelligence, I want you to forget about governments, forget about national security. If you want to do business, or you're thinking in the business world, this is what you can do to benefit in the business world. If you're looking for commercial salability of who you are, this is what we're talking about. So intelligence in a business thing. SIGINT is signals intelligence, so your mobile phone and everything that's going around, analyzing those kind of defense, DSD or NSA, these guys are SIGINT. IMINT, so it's all images and satellite shots and everything, analyzing them and getting intelligence from those. And then MASINT, which is measurement and signatures. So that's like if you go somewhere and you've got like a Geiger counter and you're counting this, you can tell something's been around here. Okay, but we're not interested in those today. We're interested in HUMINT, because that's what we as language people are all about, right? Language gets to the heart of people, and it's what all of us here do best. Now, we are in an amazing time in history, because right now, we also have this at our fingertips. Who knows what OSINT is? Open source intelligence. Okay, I've got a slide later on that I'm going to show you, but basically, I just mentioned that it's hugely labor intensive for, say, governments to train up a whole group of people and get their tradecraft and their language and everything, send them in onto the ground to get about something that might be worth 10% of their importance to their overall intelligence importance. Whereas OSINT, which is the internet, everything that's available there, open source, can actually provide 80% of the intelligence that any government or business needs to be able to get an edge in business or get an edge politically. And so if you combine our skills as language people with the resources that we have in OSINT, and I'm going to show you some really cool tools. Well, I had a talk. I've put a bit of a taper on what tools that I'm going to show today, but there are awesome tools that you can use. And between your skills in language and these tools and everything that's available, you can be a product that you can do things that people just generally can't do, because you can do it in multiple languages. Okay, and you'll be able to put stuff together that's very valuable. For people who don't know me, my grandfather was a polyglot. He spoke about 11 languages. So I'm half Fijian Indian, half Australian. But then I grew up with a second kind of family that's Indonesian Chinese. So, but my grandfather, that's him. I couldn't find the original photos, so I just took a screenshot from one of the TED Talks I did. That was him. He spoke many languages, and think of back in the 40s. He was born in 1918. It wasn't very common for a white Australian guy to speak these languages back then. And everyone thought he was a freak. But I sort of stuck to it, and I enjoyed listening to his stories and talking. But he didn't just do language. He was a radio operator during the war, and he was into computers and electronics and anything he was in there. So when I think of my grandfather, that came to mind. Does that make sense to anybody? Who reads Morse? If you don't, I've got a clip, 3 minutes, you can learn Morse code and the sign language alphabet on YouTube. So that actually says Polyglot. But we used to tap Morse code to each other underneath on the kitchen table when we were eating when we were kids. And we used to make little Morse transceivers. So Morse code communication was always fun. Does that second line make sense to anybody? Anyone? Bueller? Does it make sense? Has anybody ever learnt the major method for memorizing? Yeah. Okay, so my grandfather taught me this when I was about 4 or 5. And we used to set frameworks of numbers up, and that we would then put different languages in. But as linguists, what do those sounds tell you? They're the basis of our phonetics. You've got your palatals, you've got your sibilants, you've got your voiced, non-voiced, and everything. So these principles built into this. And so I had this from when I was a kid. So memory techniques as well as phonetics. What about the third row? Does that look familiar to anybody? Anybody? Does that make sense? Rubik's Cube. Rubik's Cube. So again, when I was about 4 or 5, that was when, in 1980, that's when the Rubik's Cube came out, 1980, 81, and we were doing it, and we'd sit and do it. But learning to understand the Rubik's Cube, he taught me that, and then we started to play and learn algorithms. But it's all about seeing patterns from other sides and looking around and building these things up. And so what I'm getting at is, it's an amazing legacy that he had to do this, but it was all fun. It was all games. It's seeing patterns in everything. Does anyone, so no cubers in here? This is an old school algorithm. FUD, so this is if you're going to do, you need to flip 2 center cubes at the end on the third layer to get it. Yeah, you can take it, but that algorithm, but that's been with me since I was about 5. But anyway, Rubik's Cube, seeing puzzles. How about this one? Does that make sense to anyone? Okay, if you get a calendar and you look at January as 0, every month subsequent to that, that's how many days forward that the first of the month is pushed. And so we used to play games where we'd bounce off, you'd get any date from last century or this century, and you'd be able to tell what day it is. It's all about formulas and playing. This is the most important thing that he said you'll need to know in the new age, where we are today. What is it? Always know your 16 times tables. So we used to bounce hexadecimal, binary, and we would code, back then it was a Commodore 64, being able to get in there. And so your 16, to this day, you look at colors or you look at your keys, you can start to hook that into your major system and remember numbers in hex, binary, but 16 times tables, 7 and 4 times tables for dates are important. And finally, this was my grandfather as well. What is that? The radicals. And so we learned the radicals and we used to make up our own characters and things, but language was a game. Language was patterns. It's putting everything together. It wasn't just language. The whole world was patterns. The whole world was codes, was being encoded into all these crazy systems. We could see things coming from all different angles, and if they weren't, we could make that system. This is where our minds are at as language people. And take a photo of that and like go back and look into these other things. If you've been into languages and you've come so far as to come to a freaking Polyglot conference, you obviously have a mind that enjoys this kind of stuff. Because the stuff we talk about doesn't go well at cocktail parties. But we can talk about it here. So I just wanted to bring this up because I've talked to several people here, and at least the concepts behind what I have on this screen here might resound with several people here. You get so into things, so into indigenous languages, so into the links between all of the hanja and the kanji and the hanzi and the zhinom in Vietnamese, and we see these patterns in everything. When you go and you speak to somebody at a cocktail party and you tell them, and it's like a stone dropping. You cannot go and reveal yourself in the real world. So when I was at school, and I spoke different language, I didn't realize it, and I didn't think of it as a career. Careers advisor, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, you tell me, you're a career advisor. And so this is what they said. Languages. You're going to be an interpreter or a translator. You can be a teacher. You can work in hospitality as a flight attendant, or you can work for the Foreign Service. Take your pick. How many people here work as interpreters, translators? How many people here work as teachers or in academia? How many people here work in hospitality? Flight attendant. I was a flight attendant when I was 21. It was best job in the world for a 21-year-old. But you don't want it to go further. How many people work for not saying you have to wear a coat like that, but work for Foreign Service? They're sitting in the corner. Very, very nice. No, it doesn't have to be clandestine, but you can just work for the State Department or any of these. I work and have worked with all areas that you see there, but there's one thing about all of these things. What do they have in common? Have a look at these. Just have a look at those again. What do they all have in common? Empathy, I hear. People.
People are a medium between somebody and somebody else.
Yeah?
Working for others.
I'm sorry, my take on it is going to be less virtuous.
They don't pay well.
The pay is shit. You are worth nothing. You are a cog in a big piece of machinery, and your price can be trodden down, even gotten for free, because it might open an opportunity to get more work out of it. The pay for those things and most things that people see. And I've worked at that. I've worked as simultaneous interpreters. I've worked in teaching. I train people in the Foreign Service from different governments. And they're desperate just to get their bonus to speak the language. They want to get a couple of $100 extra a month. And they're being pushed, and they're being used as a little pawn in a big machine to get this. The pay is shit. It's not business. You're just going to be, we call in Thai, mot ngan, a little ant worker, and do your job and be happy, and you're happy because you're doing what you like. Go and speak your languages. The value you create, though, is immense. And so the question is, if I was asked, in what careers will language give you an advantage? If you ask that, the actual thing is, in what careers won't language give you an advantage? Every single area of business, or where you're dealing with humans, or don't even have to do with humans, but interaction between humans, being a person who has a level of language in multiple languages, you have an innate advantage against anybody else in that field. And so why do you have to then bring yourself down to just be a servant of the people working in those fields? Why not be the people to do it? And so this is where I'm coming from. And I don't want to belittle anyone because I love translating and interpreting, or maybe not translating, but simultaneous interpreting. You just switch your brain off and you go into autopilot. And you can do it, you go in, you get paid, you don't have to think, and you're gone. It's great. But it's not sustainable. And you have to do that. And it's not building for the future. If you're a polyglot and you're here and you have the passion enough to come here, you have a superpower. And you have a superpower that's worth way more than what the market is telling you you're worth. And so I want to share with you some of the industries that I've been in. And so I'm just showing you a little bit of the career and where it's brought me, ups and downs and going around. But man, it's been an awesome ride, and the value you have is huge. So don't just be an interpreter. You hold the keys to the kingdom, okay, or a translator. As an interpreter, the reason I ask, because if you're there, you're with heads of state. I've worked with heads of state all over the world, with people in the top of industry, with people from who are developing policies that are going to govern the way the world functions. And you're sitting there and you're getting some of the best knowledge from the best people in the entire planet. Yet so many interpreters just sit there and they just become a machine, and it goes through, I'm going to do my job, check off, here Fred, here Sam, and go home. And this information you're getting is gold. It's stuff that nobody else has access on the planet to. It's stuff that people kill for and set whole intelligence agencies out to be able to learn from that. Yet you as interpreters, if you're there in the field and you just clock in, clock out, and then it's done. What I started doing many years ago is learn. And so if I was working on a job with the United Nations on sustainable development, I would go in and study and learn, and then contact more people in the industry to learn until that I could actually get hired in as a consultant on sustainable development rather than being hired as an interpreter. Interpreter, you get probably $300 a day. As a consultant, you get $3,000 a day. Or if it's UN, $1,900 to $2,500 a day. It's a big difference. And you can go in teams. In all different industries. So what happened? Has anyone heard of Dale Carnegie? Carnegie. Okay, how to win friends and influence people. It just happened by chance, but I ended up finding myself working for Dale Carnegie in Thailand. The main reason was to justify a salary being paid to me at a certain level. So they said, well, they'll just bill it under Dale Carnegie. I just happened they said, well, if you're going to do that, you have to become a real trainer. And so I did all my accreditation and came through, and it changed my life. And it was communication skills and business analysis. We did business health checks, leadership training, sales training, but I learned a whole set of skills that we would go in and analyze companies. I thought, wow, this is awesome. But then I found out that not only that, I would do it in Taiwan, you do it in Chinese, you do it in China, we do it in Indonesian. There are these cultural aspects that let me do things that, say, the monoglots there couldn't do, or interpret that. And I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. So I went out and started my own company and started running training and started getting my trainers. And soon enough, probably about 15 years ago now, Pepsi called me. They said, look, we have an issue. In Thailand, well, not just Thailand, but they said in Thailand, it's terrible. Thais just don't listen. We run training, we pay a fortune, and we get people to run training for them. They come over, best trainers in the world. And the Thais are just, can you come and take a look? So I went in, and it was a 3-day workshop. They had this amazing trainer in from Australia on modern trade key account management. And I sat in, and sure enough, the Thais were just dead. They were just there. Questions, no reaction at all. Come to the break, and I went into, if you want to know, by the way, in any company get the pulse of a organization, after a meeting, just go to the bathroom and listen to everybody talk. And they'll tell you everything you need to know about a company. But then you hear and you thought, oh, these guys they're not stupid. They're actually very lively. They have their ideas. The whole thing is that it was all in English. And he was delivering in a very, we call falang, a very Western way. And the Thais are just, yeah, whatever. And waited to get it. So I said to the director of Pepsi for the region, I said, what would it take for you to train me to run this course? Because I had my background in training. And so he and his team, they sent me, and we went to Hong Kong and went back and forth, and they trained me up over the next 3 months in key account management, in running P&Ls, in modern trade, in Tesco. I learned to crunch the numbers, stock turns and everything so we could run it. And then I went back and I ran it for the Thais in Thai. And it was night and day. Not because of the way I trained or whatever, just because it spoke to the heart. And they said, could you do that in Chinese? Yeah. And so we went and we did it through China, in Beijing and Shanghai. And then they said, could you do that in Indonesian? Sure. So we went to Indonesia. And so for the next 5-6 years, I became the regional trainer for all of these programs in Pepsi. And then they sent me to the US and to other places to learn advanced negotiation skills that we could then train their leadership team. At the same time, Tesco at the beginning, who knows Tesco? Okay. So Tesco in Thailand were having issues, and so they were put in contact with me, their leadership team, and it was modern trade. So Pepsi is the supplier, Tesco is the buyer. And so, oh, by the way, they're the skills that I got doing my work with Pepsi. These skills crossed over then to Tesco. And so they were going through hell with the Thai government and all of this, and so I went in and started to coach the leadership team from the UK how to actually hit their goals in Thailand, and then became the trainer for those guys. There are also, has anybody, who lives in Asia here? Okay, there is a certain thing that happens in Thailand. If a Thai person studies overseas and comes back to Thailand, and sometimes you'll hear it on their accent in Thai, and if Thais hear that they're foreign, the locals will turn off. เขาจะหมั่นไส้ If you're Thai, we have a word mansai, and it's like, who do you think you are? Or you're too falang. And so I also started running like workshops too, because there were a series of leaders they thought were Thai, but they were being taken as falang by the locals, and the locals weren't listening to them. So this, and then started doing that across China and Indonesia and different Malaysia, different countries for Tesco. And so those work together, and so you can see the skill set were very similar. To this day, I still run modern trade workshops in Malaysia for buyers and suppliers for all of the things from this training that I got in there. And it's much more lucrative than interpreting to be able to run that. Oil and gas. I ran a cultural workshop for an oil and gas company for Thai culture. And then after it, this guy said, well, there's a reason why we called you in. I actually put a clip of this in Chinese out on YouTube. And they said, we have a little issue. Could you come down to us to his place called Satahib and check out what's going on? And so I have a deal. I will go into a company and listen to everything that people say, but I don't have to tell the CEO anything. And I don't have to give names to anything. I just need to hear what the problems are. So I went down there and started listening. It took 3 hours to get there in the morning, and starting to listen. And after about 4 groups, 5 groups, another group of people came in and they said, Kun Jay Krap, they call me Jay, my middle name. We're not going to talk to you now. Can you come back at 2 o'clock? But don't come back here. We have another office over the other side of the site. Come and see us there and we'll share some stuff with you. So I went there, and 2 o'clock, I was a bit worried, and I didn't tell anyone else that I was going over there. I got in there, and they said, I don't know if you realize this, but there was a murder here. Somebody had hired a hitman to take somebody out from the company just recently. And then they gave me 5 names, and they said, what had happened is that one of the Westerners had a wife, and another one had a girlfriend, and they had no idea when they set the company up. They were from the north, and they were girls from who knows where, and they were hooked into the northern mafias. And then they were having a clash with the local mafias in Rayong, and they were fighting, and so then these northerners were faking skill certifications and all these other things to bring their people in, and they were procuring cars and selling them in Cambodia, and all of this stuff, and all these rackets going on that the local mafias were getting angry about, and there was this whole internal war that the Westerners had no idea that was going on. And they said, if you can't get rid of these 5 people, we have a fund together to take them out. And I thought, holy shit. I sat and listened to it, and it said, so please, like, because if you can't do it, there's only one other way to fix this. And so I went back, and the next 3 days, I wrote a report, and it was confidential. I sent it through to the guy that hired me in, and he said, I can't show that to my boss. And I said, well, that's what they've said. They had no idea. They just thought it was a cultural issue that people had to learn how to not touch people on the head and things like that. It went way deeper than that superficial stuff. And so he sent this report to his boss, who was a CEO in Perth. The next day, the message got back, and he said, I thought so. They wrapped up the project, shifted part of it to Vietnam, closed it, got rid of everything out of there, and that was that. And then from then on, they hooked me up with another company to qualify me in behavioral safety training for oil and gas. I traveled to Australia and got accredited in behavioral safety, and then taproot analysis, so I could go in as a auditor on sites, offshore, onshore. And so I started doing offshore, onshore oil and gas work. Not as a linguist, but as somebody who could go in and audit. But the language was the key, because people start to open up to you. So these are the skills that happen in there, and I start learning about engineering and all of these things. Pharma, similar things happening, working around, but pharma, they're the skill sets: lobbying, propaganda, sales tactics, and law. Health was sort of a byproduct in the pharma industry. But I think the top 4 skills were very valuable, and to see how it works. And then United Nations, I've worked for many UNDP agencies and many UN agencies, many with the UNDP, ILO, WTF. But again, you learn similar things: lobbying, propaganda, sales tactics. For 3 years is where I met my wife. We were doing not actually smuggling people, but we, again, instead of being an interpreter, I started being an interpreter, getting called in to help these kids basically being taken into prison because they were captured for people smuggling. I had just arrived in Australia after many years of not being there, and I thought, this is ridiculous. And the interpreter was on decent money, but it was money. And so I spoke with a lawyer, and I said, what would it take to be able to start to fight the cases for these kids? And so he started to get funding from the Australian government, because the kids have a right to a case against the Crown. And so for the next 3 years, and my wife now, we ended up traveling through the jungles of Indonesia, collecting evidence how these gangs were recruiting kids. And we got about 150, 160 people returned to Indonesia from maximum security prisons, who are basically mules, the victims of the gangs. To this day, we get consulted about people smuggling and human trafficking issues, and work with different departments. You can see a pattern here. You're not just the linguist. You're not the translator being called in for a job. You become at least a certain degree of expertise in areas that you can speak at an intelligent level with the people who work in that area, and you are the person who fills the skill gap that they know they're lacking. And that is worth a lot of money to them. Now, for the past 3 years, I've been working in aerospace, and we have totally changed the whole supply chain of aerospace for the way Rolls-Royce engines, GE engines, structures for Airbus, Boeing, Pratt & Whitney engines, all those, rather than being Eurocentric, are now shifting down to be Asia-centric. China, Japan is huge, but we've been working in that, and so it's not just interpreting that, but it's working with the teams. I was saying to Mike, as we're speaking here, I've set up these communication channels on the ground, and people from all of the aerospace companies send me 20, 30 messages a day of what's going on the ground to this day. I haven't betrayed their trust, and they know as soon as they send something to me, it's going to be responded to. And they send it in all the different languages. So, What do the CEOs and people, decision makers who are going to pay you the money, what do they actually need? They do not need the latest app to learn a language. If you develop an app to teach a language, you are selling to little HR directors who have KPI boxes to tick and don't give a crap how well somebody learns a language. And the reality is that majority of people do not want to learn a language the way we learn them. All they want to do is tick their KPI so they get their bonus. They don't want to learn languages. But the decision maker who actually has the cash to invest in you, this is what they want. They want an open door policy, especially Western people, and you're not going to get it in Asia. You can bridge that gap. Because people will not just come out, I have an open door policy, come and speak to me. Yeah, sure, the crickets are going to talk to you. Nobody will speak to the CEO directly, but they want to speak. And they'll often say, you can tell him I said it, I just don't want to do it personally. So you can be that, and it's worth money to them. They want to understand what's going on the ground that will affect the business. If you can give them a heads up of what's going to happen to their business, or trends that are happening, or if there's rumors on the ground like that. They had no idea all of this stuff was going on the ground and cars being sold across the border and all of this. Everyone in the company know except for the Gaitin, except for the foreigners. And I'm sure some of them knew as well, but they were just keeping it from the people who they didn't want to know. Ensure that teams understand that they have an impact on their goals. If you can communicate with local teams in organizations across regions, and you can, because any CEO, they need to have their teams hit their goals that are sent to them from headquarters. So if you can let them realize their impact on business goals, you've done their job for them. Next one is ensure that teams understand achieving business goals is going to give them a better life. They have opportunities for development. They'll get their bonuses. Right now, and so many messages come in. If you look at the messages in the early days, we don't get enough money. They need to pay us more overtime. All of these, we call in Thai, tuk tik kind of comments, but now they know they're not going to ask those sort of things because they're actually thinking, we should probably start up a new learning series or run another training to train on this piece of software because it's going to be allow us to be able to hit these targets that we've set for 2 months. If we don't hit it, we're not going to get our bonuses. It's a very different mindset. And that is worth gold to any CEO. Rather than focusing on just daily wage kind of stuff, they're actually focused on moving the business forward, and you with people with language and cultural understanding can achieve that for them. Communicate with headquarters. I had a conference call last night with the UK, and I have to rush back tomorrow because they're flying in from the UK, but I have to bridge the compliance team from the UK they have 39 companies in their aerospace organization, because if they ran compliance policy from the West directly in Asia, it's going to fall on its face. And so I've been working with the team, so we have to work their compliance in gently, otherwise it's going to backfire. So we were speaking last night on the phone, and then they're flying in again. So Monday, I have to be back in Rayong running this with them, but you become the bridge then between headquarters, and you understand the business intimately. And then how do you implement global compliance policies at a local level? Does anybody work in the private industry, like non-language? Does this look like stuff that your companies need, right? You're not an interpreter. You're not a translator. Get expertise and you become that. And you're super valuable. Now, this is the kicker. If we can do it together, where can we go? Now, it goes even further. This is an example of some of the communications I've set up. This is a dam building project in Vietnam between Italy, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. And they had huge issues there, so I set multilingual communication channels anonymous, and we get flow of information that can coordinate like an orchestra conductor and start to iron out these problems that were causing havoc and literally billions of dollars in this dam. And you can see this is in 4 languages, so English, Lao, Thai, and Vietnamese. And each of them have their own set. But they're communicating. And they communicate as though they would with people from their own country. And I just help conduct it. And then I have teams in each language team in the company. That then I feed it through to the right people. And the communication starts to flow. So, the value of language. You have high value, low value. So high value, low value. Low value with language is being an interpreter. Google Translate will do that. And that's all that's needed. If you're just looking at functional language, that. High value, you become a node in a network of business, the business community, industry, political, the press, education. If you can link all of these, you become very valuable to them. And so language, but the key is language prosody. Not only do you have to have the language, but you have to have the deep cultural insights, you have to fluent. People have to feel familiar when they're speaking to you. You're not a foreigner speaking to them. But as long as they do and they feel that familiarity, well then you have it. And you can give them insights. They'll be open to you. So you want to be in the middle of business, government, military, media, and academia. And just to let you know, data is the key. Just 1 minute and I'll finish this. These are the top companies in 2019. What's the one thing in common? Data, intelligence. We have the ability to collect data and intelligence as people with language on the scale of no other people on the planet, especially now with Opensource. We can install these things, but not only that, we can actually see what's going on the ground in multiple languages. These are some of the tools I use. So I have a slide here. The reality is, if some of this has resonated with you and these topics, like Mike's topic and all of this, there's a good chance you're probably on the autistic spectrum. It's not a bad thing, but there's a good chance that you're there. If you concentrate so much on a language, you get this and you start seeing patterns from everywhere and you just totally get into it. Oh yeah, and that links into this and that links into this. You're probably on the spectrum somewhere. But the cool thing about being that is that you could take that and not only focus it on language, start focusing it on other industries. Start learning how to code. Start learning how to analyze data. Set up a Linux box for yourself and start learning how to use bash and awk and manipulating data around. I use this tool called, I had it set up before, but basically there are tools where you can scan data sources from all over the world and start to build maps. We needed to find out people who had specialized aerospace knowledge. I started doing checks in Chinese, in Hebrew, in all these things around to see what people worked in companies before. I checked different data sources that were available. People didn't realize they were available, but I could search them in Chinese. And then this program helps map them all together, and we were able to then call them, go and meet these people, and we made 2 deals, one with Rolls-Royce and another with GE across in China, from this data that we generated that wasn't there before. There are amazing tools that you can use to aggregate data, to search data, to put it together, to use that language brain to analyze things in the real world that are actually worth money. People don't give a crap, seriously, about learning language. In the real world, yeah, it'd be nice, but they don't want to learn like we do. So give them something that is of value to them, and you use your skill as a superpower, and it's going to be worth much more. Thank you.
I just want to point something out you didn't say. Actually, it does say there, like you can say it Vietnamese, you can say it in Thai, etc., which is a very important point, because when you want to get that input. You didn't say that. Having talked to you, that's a very important point.
It's huge. And by the way, I've just blocked out the QR codes because these are anonymous, so anybody can actually do it. So I've tried to make it super easy. But yeah, and actually they're not direct translations of each other either. No, they're not. Once you're in this world, you don't have to look at accuracy. You want to look at the fruit of what you're doing. Accuracy is saying this word has to mean this, and you get bogged up in semantics, and I don't deal with that anymore because you want to get the final goal.
Thank you for your speech, and I found it very interesting not to just work as an interpreter, but as an expert. And I was impressed that you worked in like very different fields. But my question is, so before jumping into new field, you don't have the expertise in that field.
No.
And so how could you persuade the CEO to hire you not just as a interpreter, but as a expertise?
Because they start off, but basically all of my clients are word of mouth. And so they come in, and so I have a good solid base of clients across, and then they take me with me to other projects as long as we can work, and then they train me up. I like learning any subject the same way I like learning language. So these past 3 years, I've been learning about jet turbine engines and forging and titanium alloys and all of this stuff so we can go and negotiate with forging companies in China. I'm willing to be trained. And as long as you can speak, I don't have to be total expert, but you have to know enough to be able to understand what's going on in a negotiation. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Let's
you.
have a big hand for Stu.